So we've touched a little bit on the Heat. The Heat last night, obviously, they get the win against the Pacers. Oh my God, I love watching Bam every single night. Obviously, I've given you my thoughts on most of the NBA trade landscape over the last 24 hours. Let's bring aboard here to ZASLOW Show 2.0. Brian Geltzeiler, SiriusXM NBA Radio. You hear him during the day sometimes, on the weekends, certainly, with former NBA coach Sam Mitchell. Brian, thanks a lot. You're making your debut here, ZASLOW Show 2.0. I appreciate it. And certainly right in the middle of the chaos. How about this? The NFL, the Super Bowl's in 3 days. The NFL is the king. And these last couple of days, the NBA is really sticking it to the NFL. Between LeBron and then you got all the trades. Forget about this NFL. The NBA is the king this week.
There's no doubt. Listen, between LeBron breaking the record, it started really Sunday with the Kyrie Irving trade. He makes the trade demand last Thursday. Irving gets dealt on Sunday relatively quickly based upon the trade demand that he levied. Then you get LeBron breaking Kareem's record on Tuesday night, which is a historic moment. And you got to tip you, whether you like LeBron or you don't like LeBron. He didn't do it as a compiler. He's still one of the top 10 players in the league. And it's amazing what he's been able to do with his career as a guy that wasn't necessarily considered primarily a scorer for the balance of his career. So it's absolutely been amazing what you've seen with LeBron. And then you get, now coming into today's trade deadline, you get Kevin Durant getting dealt, which is just so. Listen, the NBA is taking front and center. I guess as of tomorrow, the Super Bowl can come back into focus. But the NBA's had themselves a week this week on Super Bowl week, which is real nice.
Really cool. Let's start with the Laker trade. What did you make of it? I don't think they didn't get back any proven winners, but I think you look at the total landscape. I thought the Lakers are looking like a big winner today. What do you think?
I don't totally agree with you, Jonathan. And this is what I'll say. D'Angelo Russell is one of the worst teammates in the league. Now, price tag wise, did they do okay? They did. You only gave up one of those picks. So you still have a pick in your hip pocket if you want to do something else today. But I have to tell you, Russell, I can't wait to watch Russell try to play with LeBron James and see how that goes. Keep one thing in mind. The Timberwolves traded for D'Angelo Russell. And by the way, one of the worst trades in the history of the sport, okay? That kind of falls under the radar after this summer's Gobert trade. But, Wiggins and a lottery pick for D'Angelo Russell, pretty awful. But Russell, Karl Anthony Towns wanted him, so they pwned it up for him. Karl Anthony Towns couldn't wait for him to get out of town this time. He had enough of them. Russell wears on everybody. So I'm curious to see this chemistry experiment. Listen, Malik Beasley is a really good three-point shooter, one of the better bench shooters in the league, pretty underrated. Not a lot of people know about him or talk about him. Real good player. And Jared Vanderbilt's on a great contract. Will help Anthony Davis inside in a big way. Very athletic guy. So they got a couple players here. They didn't do badly from that standpoint. But thinking Russell's going to cure a lot of their ills, I'm not sure. The Lakers' chemistry problems don't go away with shipping out Russell Westbrook. There's definitely AD LeBron issues, and you put D'Angelo Russell in this mix. I don't know that works out all that well either. Patrick Beverley's his own man there. The Lakers are going to be fun to watch. That doesn't mean they're going to be good, Jonathan.
It's interesting. You bring up the AD thing, and I think people are making a little bit too big a deal out of that picture of Anthony Davis sitting there. He's got the puss on the face. Everyone's excited about LeBron breaking the record. But you're now saying also, and I've heard this as well over the last 2 days, that there may be a little bit of an issue there between those two guys. Yes?
It's not new. I'm going to tell you what the genesis of it was. Last year at the All-Star break, LeBron James did a press conference that pretty much telegraphed his exit out of Los Angeles whenever that ends up happening. And to my understanding, Anthony Davis looked at that with eyebrows raised. Like, are you kidding, dude? Like, you brought me here to do this. We're supposed to engage in this together. And now you're pretty much willing to leave me here on a team that's bereft of assets and go because you want to go play with your son or wherever you're going to want to go. LeBron, listen, LeBron is loyal to LeBron. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for who he is as an NBA player. but he's a tough teammate. He's not an easy teammate, which is what makes the whole Russell thing interesting. So Davis the other night, I was not surprised that Davis wasn't necessarily all in on celebrating that moment with LeBron. Anthony, and it's also, I'll say this to you, Jonathan, it's not a coincidence that Anthony Davis's best stretch this season came while LeBron James was injured. Okay, let's not forget that either. I think Davis would be fine to not be with LeBron James. Keep this in mind, Anthony Davis won a championship in 2020. All right. And I will never be a guy that says the bubble championship doesn't count. In my book, it counts more. So I don't play that game. Okay. But he won a championship in 2020. He's one of the top 75 players ever in the league. At this stage of his game, he wants to go somewhere, win, and be happy and feel respected. This LA situation is just it's a mess. It's been a mess, and so it's not a wonderful situation there. And it wouldn't surprise me if in this offseason, if the things aren't successful in LA this year, and Anthony Davis is the one that asks out.
Really interesting. Let's talk about Durant. I don't know. Were you awake last night? I was not. I woke up to this news. Were you awake last night?
I saw it in the morning.
Yeah,
I woke up and saw it this morning. I was like, wow. I looked at my phone. I was, wow.
Right.
Yeah, the thing about this Durant thing, and I think it's important to note this. This was not an angry thing between the Nets and Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant had requested a trade last summer. The Nets were, that was an angry thing. The Nets were able to, with the credit, Joe Tsai's wife, Claire, did a great job with this. They were able to heal that and pull that together with Kevin. And part of the word they gave Kevin is that we're going to try it this year. Yeah. If it's not working, we'll find a place to send you that you're going to want to be. And Kevin took them at their word. So Kevin, when Irving got traded, and Kevin was in the mix the whole time and pretty much said, I don't blame you guys. If he wants to go, send him. He also said to them, if you could find somewhere, if you could get me to Phoenix, not necessarily find somewhere for me to be, but get me to Phoenix where I want to be, keeping in mind that Kevin Durant and Devin Booker spent the entire summer working out together last summer. And some of that had to do with the trade request as well, because he wanted to get to Phoenix. So Durant had said to them, if you can get me to Phoenix here, I would appreciate it. If not, we'll go play ball and do the best we can. But the Nets had a concern here, and I think it's important to note this as well. 2 straight years, Durant's had a significant knee injury. If Durant gets hurt again here, doesn't finish the season, are you able to get this kind of value for him? Well, maybe not. He's 34 years old. So I think the Nets kind of looked at this, and one of the things that I think fell through the cracks when people are analyzing this trade is how good Mikal Bridges has been this year. Guy's about to become a star. He's kept Phoenix's head above water without Booker. He's been fantastic, best player on their team. So they traded that. And again, obviously Booker's a better player, but with Booker out, he was the best player on their team. They traded that player along with a heck of a pick package, and Cam Johnson's a real good young player. Nets did really well here, and I think the Nets took the bird in hand approach. The other thing that I think factored into this with the Nets, Kyrie Irving's on a massive PR campaign to trash the Nets front office anytime that he can. As much as a lot of us in the media and a lot of fans look at Kyrie Irving and roll our eyes because of what he does and how he handles things, we don't have a lot of personal contact with him. He's really well respected among players, and he's a dynamic guy that players like a lot. So when Kyrie Irving's out there trashing the Nets, it's not a comfortable position for the Nets. For the Nets to do something here that was really player friendly,
good look.
Kind of it recoups their reputation in the player community, and that's really important. And for the Nets, you know what? You're loaded up on all these picks, okay? 23 picks not going to be any good. The 25 picks not going to be any good. But we've seen that Sean Marks will find diamonds in the rough late in the draft, whether it's a Jared Allen, Karis LeVert. He's very good at that. Cam Thomas is another one now, a diamond in the rough late in the draft. But then 27 and 29 are going to be really good ones because Chris Paul's 38 and Kevin Durant's 34, and the Suns aren't going to stay this good. And when Durant and Paul are done, who knows if Booker and Ayton to go ahead and ask out, and all of a sudden the Suns got to be the ones that tank, and they have another team's picks. The thing for the Nets here, the James Harden deal was a disaster on 2 fronts. It was a disaster when they traded for James Harden because of what they had to give up. It was a disaster when they traded James Harden because they didn't get anywhere close to value back, and Ben Simmons is an anchor on their salary cap. He's an anchor on their basketball team. He's weighing them down. But the Harden deal by 25 is for the most part gone. There's one more swap left in 27. And that's it. So they lose their 23 pick and lose their 25 pick with one more swap here. And at that point, they've replaced some of those picks here that, let's face it, were probably maybe they're 5-10 picks down in the draft than they would have been otherwise. But this is a good way for them to land on their feet here and graduate to the next phase of Brooklyn Net basketball. Plus, they got a whole lot of good young players there. From the two guys they got from Phoenix here, Bridges and Johnson. Nick Claxton's a candidate for most improved player. Guy's been outstanding. We've seen what Cam Thomas has done. Dorian Finney-Smith is a good player on a good contract. That was a really nice deal. So they've gone out and done a nice job here of replacing pieces. I think this is a trade that works for both sides. I think it may actually in the end work better for Brooklyn than it does for Phoenix, because Phoenix is counting a whole lot on keeping a 34-year-old player and a 38-year-old player healthy enough through the season and into a playoff to be able to compete for a championship.
So, Brian, a common theme on my show this year has been the load management, which also speaks to the whole player empowerment movement that's been going on in the league the last few years. The Nets deserve blame, that's for sure. They played their part, but they gave Durant, Irving, everything they wanted, from coaches to personnel to all the extracurricular stuff they allowed those guys, specifically Irving, to get away with. I'm so over the player empowerment stuff. You want to be in control, go buy a team. Go own a team. Go start your own league. Because what winds up happening here, Brian, who are ultimately the ones? Durant's in a great situation now. Kyrie Irving's in a great situation now. You know who's not in a good situation? I know you mentioned a bunch of good young players that the Nets have gotten returned, but you know who's left in a shit situation now? The fans. It's enough of this player empowerment garbage. I'm so over it, Brian.
Well, it's not going anywhere, Jonathan. So you're going to have to get used to it. This is a lot of how the league runs right now. But I'll also say this: the blame in this situation goes with the Nets ownership group and the Nets front office. Let me explain to you about owning an NBA team. You have to have some experience, and I'll go back to when Mark Cuban bought the Dallas Mavericks and spent. And realized very quickly, guaranteed him nothing. Nothing but bad contracts. Okay, paid Eric Dampier all this money. He just done crazy contracts. Then Mikhail Prokhorov came in and bought the Brooklyn Nets and did the same thing. And I remember Cuban making public comments that he tried to talk to Prokhorov and caution him, it's not the way to go. Joe Tsai came in here and bought the team from Prokhorov, was a relatively new owner when he went out and said, hey, we're going to get all these star players. All right. Look at what Mark Lowry and A-Rod did with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I mean, one of the worst trades in history. Yeah. This Rudy Gobert. Look at what Walker Kessler's doing for Utah. I don't know that you trade Walker Kessler traded for Rudy Gobert right now. Okay, and they got all these picks. So what do we have here in Phoenix? This is a brand new owner that literally just took control of the team last week. Okay, Matt Ishbia, and he's making this huge splash on his way in to go get Kevin Durant. My point is that the smarter owners are not necessarily buying into player empowerment as much. Right there in Miami, is there a ton of player empowerment when it comes to how Mickey Harrison?
It's part of the reason why LeBron
organization.
Left. They weren't willing to give in to LeBron. It's part of the reason. You could debate that whether it was the right move or not. But yeah, the Heat don't play that game.
Yep, I will tell you. I had a conversation with the president of basketball operations from a team I won't name, who we talked about, had a player empowerment conversation, and the quote that he gave me is, "I let my guys know this ain't the transfer portal. NBA doesn't have a transfer portal." So my point is, listen, when it comes to load management, as much as it's easy to blame the teams. And a lot of that's player driven. Yeah. Players are wanting to sit in certain games that they have to sit, and teams look at the sports science and kind of can't totally deny it. So they will partner on it to try to figuring it's better in the long term. But when it comes to wanting to be dealt and that kind of stuff, teams, smart teams push back. Smart teams make it work. And I do think with what we saw with Brooklyn here, listen, Joe Tsai learned a whole lot about owning an NBA team from what happened here with Durant, Irving, and then James Harden. And I don't think he'll make the same mistakes again. So my point being is that a lot of the stuff that happens when players are too empowered is owners that haven't owned the teams long enough that are giving players too much power. Ownership groups that are dug in well and in shape with the right type of history and have the right people in place aren't necessarily giving into players as much. We don't hear as much about those situations. We hear a lot more about the situations where players are moving all the chess pieces. And listen, the guy that's the most guilty of it, and you mentioned his name, is LeBron. LeBron does it everywhere. Part of the reason why the Lakers are the big mess that they are right now is because LeBron couldn't let this management team leave well enough alone with guys like KCP and Kyle Kuzma that were making major contributions, and Alex Caruso that were meaningful to the team. So it's when you start to listen too much to the players about what they do, there's a reason that players are players and that personnel executives are personnel executives and owners are owners. Everybody's got their role to play. But I think sometimes you get situations where, personnel execs worried about their jobs, owners worried about keeping players happy because they're worried about players are going to leave. You just got to make the next best right decision for your franchise and hope the fact that the player you brought in, that your star player, trusts you.
We're going through a weird thing down here, Brian. The Heat. The Heat look. Heat had a good win last night. Bam Adebayo seems like he's taken the next step. He's phenomenal to watch every night now. Really great again last night. 36, I think he finished with 38 actually finished with last night. But they're like a number 5, number 6 seed. They're kind of middling right there. And the Heat fans getting a little bit tired of seeing the same group. They want a move to be made by the deadline today. If the Heat can't pull off a move, the reaction's not going to be pretty down here. But I feel like the Heat fans may be lacking a little bit of perspective here, Brian. 3 years, it's not exactly a long-suffering franchise. 3 years ago, they were in the finals. Last year, they were a shot away from the finals. It's not for a lack of trying if they're attempted to make a move. Look, no one wants Kyle Lowry, all right? The Heat can't do anything about nobody wanting Kyle Lowry. It's not NBA 2K where we turn off the computer assistants and you make whatever trades you want. You can't do that. So is the Heat fan lacking a little bit of perspective if they can't get anything done today?
I'm a defending Heat fan today, Jonathan, and this is what I'll say. You're on the clock with Jimmy Butler. He's an older player. He's got a lot of tread on those tires. So if you're going to do something, with having Jimmy Butler be your centerpiece, it's in the next year or two. So I do understand the thought. Listen, you're right. They've shopped Kyle Lowry all over the place. No one wants him. No one wants a contract. It's not, and the one spot they weren't willing to do it with was Brooklyn. They wouldn't have taken him anyway. But, they did. Kyrie Irving is not a Heat DNA type of guy. I know that anybody they talk to asks for Tyler Hero, and they're not trading Tyler Hero. So, Hero and Bam are the core of the young core of how they're going to build here in a post-Butler era. The Heat are hamstrung by one terrible contract, and it's Duncan Robinson. It was an awful contract. It was a massive, massive mistake and an overreaction to sign him to that kind of money.
Do you think if he wasn't hurt right now, he's in a cast, do you think they'd be able to move him today if he wasn't hurt right now?
No. He was lightning in a bottle for a period of time. He just isn't. The problem with Duncan Robinson, he's just not good enough defensively. He never really was. And if you're going to commit to Tyler Hero, you're never going to be able to win big-time playoff games with Hero and Robinson on the floor at the same time. Hero's not a good defensive player either, but you can hide one. It's impossible against really good teams to hide two. And so that's the problem with Robinson. No one wants the contract. I know the package that they're offering out to try to bring people in is Robinson, this rookie Jovic, who's highly regarded and a good player, and they're willing to put a first-round pick in there, or depending upon the player, multiple first-round picks. The one guy I keep an eye on is a guy that was in Miami when they went to the finals in 2020, and that's Jay Crowder. Brooklyn's going to move Jay Crowder along here and turn this Durant deal into a 3-way deal so they don't have to aggregate Crowder with another player. I think that Miami and Milwaukee are the two that are banging on the door. I think the one thing that has hurt the Heat this year, and not that he's had such a wonderful year with the Sixers, but the lack of finding a viable replacement for PJ Tucker. Caleb Martin just functions better as a bench player. And so I think if you were able to bring Crowder in, that is a very viable replacement for PJ Tucker. And I think that would be the type of move that would help the Heat. With all that said, you look at the top 3 teams in the East, Boston, Milwaukee, Philadelphia. No one wants to play the Heat in the playoff series. The Heat are going to be a brutal
They're going to be a pain in the ass
because of how they're built. Yeah. They are. Listen, Bam's having the best year of his career. You mentioned earlier how much you love watching Bam play. Bam's been terrific. Hero's playing great. This is a really, really good group. It's just, listen, got off to a rough start, haven't totally recovered from that yet. But I do think that if they can bring in the right piece here, they become a really dangerous team playoff time. Because the other thing is that there's the ability now if they can pass Cleveland to rise into 4. As much as I like what the Nets did, I just think the Nets are going to drop into the play-in tournament. I think that's a kind of a fait accompli here. And I think there's first of all, a spot for the Knicks to maybe not be in the play-in now. And they could potentially move up with the Hawks falling to 27 and 28 here. And then I think for the Heat, you can potentially, if you get on a little bit of a run, because the Cavs have had their own struggles, especially, they've been best defensive team in the league, but it's still, they don't bring it night in and night out, and they're just not experienced enough. There's a universe where the Heat in 3 games back in a loss against the Cavs where they can pass them. And if you can pass them and get to the 4 seed, you give them a puncher's chance. So I do think Raul's going to try very hard to add the right piece today, but not at the expense of anything significant.
2 to 4 p.m. today, Brian Geltzeiler and, of course, our pal Evan Cohen, SiriusXM NBA Radio. Are you going to be dealing with some chaos? That deadline's right smack in the middle of your coverage there. Are you going to have some chaos, you think?
There's no doubt we're going to have chaos. And Evan and I, chaos is our middle name together. We love this stuff. The hard part with Evan and I doing this is we both love fake trades. So now we're going to have to sit there for 2 hours and put our fake trades aside and deal with the real ones. So that's what we have today. And believe me, I will tell you, it is. I do a lot of radio shows over the course of the year, Jonathan. This is one of my most fun ones of the year to be able to track all this stuff in real time. Yeah, so that's on SiriusXM Channel 86 and, of course, on the SXM app.
Great job, Brian. Thanks a lot. Good having you on board.
My pleasure, Jonathan. I'll do it for you anytime, buddy. It was my pleasure.